There is a terrifying pattern hidden in the ledgers of history. It's a mathematical sequence that has silently destroyed three of the greatest superpowers the world has ever seen in just the last 500 years. It is not a pattern of war or plague or bad luck. It is a pattern of economic suicide. Right now, in the year 2025, the United States is not just approaching this pattern, it is sprinting through it. Stage by stage, decision by decision, it is almost as if our leaders are reading from the exact same script that led to absolute catastrophe every single time before. In 1590, the Spanish Empire was the richest entity on the face of the earth. They controlled half the world's known gold and silver. Their military was unbeatable, their reach was global, and their king was the most powerful man alive. Within 80 years, they were bankrupt, broken, and reduced to a second-rate power that never mattered again. In 1914, Britain ruled the largest empire in human history. The sun literally never set on their territory. The pound sterling was the only currency that mattered. If you wanted to trade, you traded in pounds. Then 40 years, the empire was gone. The currency had collapsed. Britain was reduced to being America's junior partner, forced to ask for loans just to keep the lights on. In 1991, the Soviet Union was a nuclear titan, superpower that rivaled America for half a century. It had space stations, thousands of nuclear warheads, and influence over half the globe. It ceased to exist in just 900 days, not from a foreign invasion, not from a lost war, but from an internal economic implosion so sudden that no one saw it coming. 3 times, 3 distinct superpowers, 3 complete and total collapses, all following the exact same sequence of events. And here's the fact that should keep every American awake at night. The United States has already completed 5 of the 7 stages of this fatal cycle. We are not approaching the danger zone. We are living deep inside it. This is the untold story of how empires actually die, why they always think they are the exception to the rule, and why the cold, hard math says we are next in line. Welcome to the Economic Historian. Today, we are going to look at the ledger of history, and the numbers are bleeding red. Before we dissect the pattern itself, you need to understand what imperial collapse actually looks like in practice. It is rarely the cinematic explosion we see in movies. Rome didn't fall in a day. It is a slow suffocation, followed by a sudden cardiac arrest. Imperial collapse doesn't start with a barbarian invasion or a military defeat. It starts with economic exhaustion. The empire extends far beyond its ability to maintain itself. It builds military bases in 150 countries. It fights wars on multiple fronts simultaneously. It makes promises to its citizens that it cannot keep, and it accumulates debts that it can never repay. At first, the decline is invisible to the average person. The currency still works at the grocery store. The military still wins tactical battles on TV. The government still holds press conferences. But beneath the surface, the foundation is rotting. Resources are being misallocated on a massive scale. Productive capacity shrinks as the economy shifts from making things to moving money around. The best and brightest minds begin to leave or check out of the system. Then comes the acceleration. Allies start hedging their bets. Enemies begin testing boundaries. Trade partners quietly seek alternatives to the empire's dominance. The reserve currency status, once an unshakable advantage, begins to erode. And suddenly, the very things that made the empire powerful transform into crippling vulnerabilities. Your currency, once demanded by everyone, comes flooding back home, sparking inflation. Your military spread across the world becomes an unsustainable financial burden. Your promises, once guaranteed by strength, become empty words. This is not a theoretical model. This is the documented history of what happened to Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. And it happened because they made the exact same series of decisions we are making now. They believed their power was permanent. They overextended militarily. They debased their currency. And most fatally, they refused to accept reality until the collapse was already underway. Let's examine how this pattern played out in the first modern global empire, Spain, from the 1500s to the 1600s. This is the original blueprint for disaster. After Columbus stumbled upon the Americas in 1492, Spain transformed into the first true world power. They conquered the Aztec and Inca empires and seized control of the richest gold and silver mines ever discovered by man. By 1550, Spanish galleons were hauling home hundreds of tons of silver every single year. Spain effectively controlled the money supply of Europe. The Spanish real became the world's first global reserve currency. Everyone wanted Spanish silver, and this is where the pattern begins. It starts with a country that controls the world's money and deludes itself into believing that financial dominance makes them invincible. King Philip II possessed more wealth than any monarch in history, and he spent every ounce of it on empire. This leads us to stage 1, military overextension. Spain fought wars everywhere simultaneously. They battled the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean. They waged war against France and Italy. They suppressed Protestant rebels in the Netherlands. They fought England's navy. They maintained conflicts in the Philippines and the Americas. By 1580, Spain had active military commitments on 4 continents. The cost was staggering, consuming half of Spain's total revenue, yet it was never enough. This inevitably led to stage 2, currency debasement. The Spanish crown realized it couldn't pay its bills with taxes alone. So, they did what every failing empire does. They debased the currency. They started mixing cheap copper into their silver coins. A coin that was supposed to be pure silver became 50% copper, then 75% copper. The face value remained the same, but the real value plummeted. By 1600, Spanish silver coins contained barely any silver. Merchants stopped accepting them, and inflation exploded. This is the earliest version of money printing. It's triggered stage 3, the debt spiral. Spain borrowed constantly to fund its deficits. By 1557, less than 20 years into Philip's reign, Spain declared bankruptcy. They defaulted on their debts, restructured, and then went right back to borrowing. They declared bankruptcy again in 1560, again in 1575, and again in 1596, for bankruptcies in 40 years. Each time they promised reform, and each time they repeated the cycle. This financial mismanagement led directly to stage 4, loss of productive capacity. This is the phenomenon economists now call Dutch disease, but it really started in Spain. Because they had so much free silver flowing in, they stopped producing real value. Why grow food when you can import it? Why build ships when you can buy them? Why innovate when you can just spend? The Spanish nobility considered work beneath them. Manufacturing declined. Agriculture stagnated. All the wealth flowed out to pay for French wine and Italian silk. Spain became a funnel. Gold flowed in one end and out the other. By 1600, Spain was producing almost nothing domestically. When the silver mines depleted, the entire system collapsed, ushering in stage 5, social decay, where crime exploded and the empire turned into a hollow shell. Now let's jump forward 300 years to the British Empire. It's the empire where the sun never set. At its peak, Britain controlled 25% of the world's land surface. The pound sterling was the undisputed king of finance. Just like Spain, they believed it was permanent. But they followed the pattern perfectly. Stage 1, military overextension. By 1900, Britain had commitments in India, Africa, the Middle East, China, and the Pacific. When World War I started, Britain chose to bankrupt itself to win. They borrowed billions from the United States. They won the war, but they lost their financial independence. Stage 2, currency debasement. The war drained Britain's gold reserves. They tried to maintain the pound's value, but the math didn't work. 1931, Britain was forced to abandon the gold standard. The pound lost 25% of its value overnight. The global reserve currency admitted it couldn't keep its promises. Stage 3, the debt spiral. Britain never recovered from the debts of the First World War before the Second one started. By 1945, Britain owed the United States more money than its entire GDP. This led to stage 4, loss of empire. In 1956, during the Suez Crisis, the United States threatened to crash the British pound if Britain didn't withdraw its troops from Egypt. In that moment, the world saw the truth. Britain was no longer a superpower. It was a debtor nation living on borrowed time. By the 1970s, Britain hit stage 5, social decay. Strikes paralyzed the country. The economy stagnated. In 1976, the former ruler of the world had to go to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, begging for a bailout like a third world country. The cycle was complete. Then, we have the Soviet Union. The most recent example, Stage 1. They spent 20% of their GDP on the military to keep up with America. Stage 4. Their central planning destroyed their productive capacity. They couldn't even feed their own people. By the 1980s, the USSR was importing grain from the US. Stage 2. The ruble became a fake currency that no one wanted. And in 1991, Stage 5 hit hard. The people lost faith in the system. The Berlin Wall fell. And 900 days later, the Soviet flag came down for the last time. Stage 2. The ruble became a fake currency that no one wanted. And in 1991, Stage 5 hit hard. The people lost faith in the system. The Berlin Wall fell. And 900 days later, the Soviet flag came down for the last time. Which brings us to today, the United States of America. If you look at the data without bias, if you look at the numbers as an economic historian, the conclusion is terrifying. We are following the exact same pattern. Stage 1. Military overextension. Check. The U.S. has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. We are funding a war in Ukraine, supporting conflicts in the Middle East, and preparing for a conflict in the Pacific. We spend nearly $1 trillion a year on defense, more than the next 10 nations combined. Yet, our recruitment numbers are down, our stockpiles are depleting, and our Navy is shrinking. We are policing the world on a credit card. Stage 2. Currency debasement. Check. In 1971, closed the gold window, turning the dollar into a pure fiat currency. But look at the last 5 years. Since 2020, we have printed over $6 trillion. That is 40% of all dollars in existence, created in just a few years. The purchasing power of the dollar has collapsed. A house that cost $200,000 10 years ago costs $500,000 today. That isn't the house getting more valuable. That is the dollar getting worthless. We are debasing the currency to inflate away our debt, just like Spain mixed copper into their silver. Stage 3. The debt spiral. Check. This is the most dangerous stage. The U.S. national debt is over $36 trillion. That is 120% of our GDP. But here's the scary statistic. We are now spending more money just paying the interest on our debt than we spend on our entire military. We are borrowing money just to pay the interest on the money we already borrowed. That is the definition of a death spiral. There is no mathematical way to pay this back. We will either default or we will print the money to pay it, causing hyperinflation. There is no third option. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. Check. America used to be the factory of the world. Now we are the consumer of the world. We have hollowed out our manufacturing base and shipped it to China, Mexico, and Vietnam. We run a trade deficit of nearly $1 trillion a year. We import our antibiotics, our steel, our microchips, and our spare parts. If a war broke out tomorrow and trade stopped, America would not be able to sustain itself. We have become Spain, rich in money, poor in production. Stage 5. Social decay. Check. Look at our cities. Look at our politics. The polarization is total. The trust in media, government, and institutions is at an all-time low. The social contract that holds a nation together is fraying. We see the rise of populism, the rise of civil unrest, and a population that feels the system is rigged against them. This is exactly what happened in the late stages of Rome and late-stage Spain. And in the final years of the USSR, we are sitting squarely at the end of Stage 5. The Soviet Union collapsed at Stage 5. Britain lost its empire at Stage 5. So what comes next? Stage 6 is the loss of reserve currency status. This is the tipping point. This is when the world stops trusting your money. And we are seeing the cracks forming right now. It is called de-dollarization. For 50 years, the US dollar was the only game in town. But because we have weaponized the dollar through sanctions, because we seized Russia's assets, the rest of the world is scared. China, Russia, India, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia are building a new system. They're trading oil in yuan. They're buying gold at record rates. They're creating an alternative to the SWIFT banking system. When the world no longer needs dollars to buy oil, trillions of those dollars will come flooding back to the United States. This will trigger hyperinflation unlike anything we have ever seen. This is the moment the empire truly ends. And finally, Stage 7. Total collapse. Collapse does not mean the country disappears from the map. Spain is still there. Britain is still there. But the empire disappears. The standard of living crashes. The superpower becomes a normal power. The ability to dictate terms to the world vanishes. It is a painful, brutal adjustment where a nation realizes it is no longer the main character of history. 3 empires followed this pattern: Spain, Britain, the USSR. Each believed they were exceptional. Each believed they were different. Each believed the rules of economics didn't apply to them. We are telling ourselves the same lies right now, we say. But we have the tech companies. We have the aircraft carriers. You're America. But the pattern doesn't care about exceptionalism. The pattern is mathematical. You cannot spend beyond your means forever. You cannot maintain a global empire without productive capacity. You cannot debase your currency without consequences. The sequence is locked in. The only question remaining is timing. Maybe we have 10 years, maybe we have 5. Maybe if the debt spiral accelerates, we have less. But the pattern says collapse is coming. And when it comes, it won't be slow. It will be sudden. A currency crisis triggers a debt crisis, which triggers a political crisis. Overnight, the superpower becomes a cautionary tale. This is not pessimism. This is history. And history is a ledger that must eventually balance. The United States has spent the last 50 years writing checks that our children cannot cash. And now, the bill collector is at the door. I am the economic historian. If you want to understand how to survive the next 2 stages, you need to understand the past. The answers aren't hiding in the future. They are written in the wreckage of the empires that came before us. Subscribe, and let's keep reading the fine print together.